Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, John Knocklinger. I'm a men's divorce coach and a New Jersey divorce attorney and mediator. Today, we're going to learn how to deal with healing from trauma, like divorce, using a holistic approach, incorporating music, food, movement, art, and even dealing with spirituality a little bit. My guest for this conversation is Jayden Aubryn. Jayden is the founder of TISE Consulting and Therapy, where the main focus is helping you build a better relationship with your body. Jayden has more initials after his name that we'd be here all day going through all of them. Suffice to say, they is a psychotherapist who knows how to help people heal from trauma. Thank you for being here today, Jayden.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Really excited to hear about how you help people deal with trauma. Because, I mean, people that go through divorce, like divorce is almost like a death in the family or like anything that's really traumatic that happens. And, there's some people that are able to get help from people like you and really learn how to rebound from that horrible trauma they went through. And there's other people out there that hole up in a closet for years and years and just don't address it and don't do anything to help themselves. So hopefully this conversation is going to help those people know that there's a better way to move forward. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit more about how you got into this field and what made you want to help people.
Oh yeah, well, I've always wanted to be a therapist since eighth grade. I realized in eighth grade that I was really good at helping other people through their problems, and it helped me contextualize the trauma that I was going through as a child. It's like, oh, it doesn't all have to be for nothing. If I can use my experiences to help others. So I originally thought about going into music therapy as a musician, ended up going into psychotherapy instead, getting my bachelor's in psychology and then a master's in social work. Um, but I am also a dancer and dance after I burnt out with music and poetry because I kept trying to monetize those things. I just like let dance be like my main like expression of self, and I noticed how, like, when I was more active in dancing, how that affected my mental health, my anxiety, like my eating, my sleep, like, just like all of the things. And so I ended up just like learning more about the science of movement and dance. Eventually became a personal trainer and learned even more about like, the endocrine system and how we feel our bodies and how different types of exercises affect different chemicals. And yeah, so there's just like two diverging paths of me being creative and also wanting to help people have kind of come together now of like, how do we use what is already accessible to us, right? Like, be creative with our life, like, be creative with the time that we have to actually promote healing.
I love that. You've had so many different interests and you've just found a way to sort of put it all together in a way to help people. And I love that. Yeah, I saw that you were a personal trainer. I was like, this is great. It's like, I'm a big proponent that, becoming healthy physically is all part of healing from anything. So that's great. What kind of traumas did you have growing up that really inspired you to do this?
Mm. Well, I guess the origin story of helping people was I had just come through a bout of suicidality when I was, in eighth grade. Just like, puberty hit, feeling all the feels. I didn't know how to manage them. Home life wasn't super great. Um, and so someone else I knew was thinking about diving suicide that night, and I was able to talk to them. So, that is something that was like really influential to me. In my home life, my parents separated twice before getting divorced. There was a remarriage. There's my uh, parents were very emotionally unavailable, pretty neglectful, at times abusive. Um, and also I was kind of a weirdo as a kid. So there's some years where I was bullied very heavily, other years where I was pretty popular. So a lot of inconsistency in my social standing. So I was just pretty like on edge all of my childhood, and no one really taught me how to feel my feelings. It was one of those just like, oh, you have big feelings, let's just put you on medication to, numb them. Uh, and then that caused a lot of health issues for me. And so, yeah, it wasn't until I was 21 years old that I finally came off medications and was like, oh my gosh, this is what it means to have feelings. Like I've never experienced it. Like all those feelings people felt at 14. Like I didn't really get to feel that until I was 21 and then had to like figure it out pretty quickly.
Wow. Do you feel that having trauma as a child, uh, does that how does that impact you as an adult, especially when something else traumatic happens?
Yeah, well, me personally, I know that I've gone through many things at this point, and I've survived when I was way less resourced than I am now. I had way less skills as a child, way less power and control over my own life. And if I could get through all of that and still like turn out to be a pretty functioning adult, then like whatever I'm going through now with all of the supports, community, skills, knowledge, wisdom that I've gained, like I can tackle anything life throws at me.
I think you're more than pretty functioning now.
Thank you.
No, I completely can relate. It's sort of not the same story, but I was gay in high school and closeted and all of that, and it was very traumatic. It was a different time, and different in some ways, but still the same in other ways, right? And going through and I think it does teach you how to handle difficult situations as opposed to someone that maybe grew up going through school and didn't have like any, when they were younger, didn't have any challenges. And then as an adult, they're hit with something, and maybe it does make it somewhat more difficult to sort of handle and figure out how to deal with those traumatic episodes. That's an interesting little idea of like how much trauma in childhood impacts your ability to handle trauma in adulthood. That's a very interesting sort of issue all in itself.
Well, that's
When
the
you
basis of resilience, right?
Yeah,
If you think about like even if you go to the gym, you have to apply stress to your body in order for it to go get stronger. If you do this like if all your gym days are easy, you're not going to actually get into shape. You have to actually tear apart your muscle fibers, right? Not so much that you injure yourself, right? But you have to tear them apart and then rest them to let them get stronger, right? And so if you have a lot of trauma, part of this is like, okay, being able to take the lesson from it, rest, learn, and then be able to apply it in a more effective way. But that is how we grow.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by how you help people, and I want to get into that. I was looking at your website before we started recording today, and I was fascinated by the fact that you obviously provide therapeutic services for people, but one of your options is to engage in this while walking around a lake.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that, seen that. It was fascinating to me. Um, where did you get that idea from, and how do you find that just getting people out in nature and walking with them and talking to them, how does that help you provide the services that you provide to people?
Oh yeah. So this is not a new idea on my part. Walk and talk therapies are definitely a thing. They can sometimes be like harder to get covered by insurance and that kind of stuff. So a lot of people don't do it. There's a bit more liability, stuff that goes along with it. But um, There are definitely, if you're interested in doing outdoor therapy or walk and talk therapies, look in your area. I assure you there is a therapist near you like doing that. But yeah, no, I really love it. There's so many benefits. There's a whole science of neuroaesthetics. So how do arts and aesthetics affect our, health, our biology, our, neurochemicals and all that kind of stuff. And from the perspective of that field, nature is like the OG, like aesthetic. Our bodies, as soon as we're in nature, our bodies start to have a calming, grounding, relax, like a home response. Like, wow, we are home. Um, and so there's that benefit of just like being in an environment that it's not, there's no fluorescent lighting, it's not small and making you feel claustrophobic, you're on an itchy couch, or like maybe to like trying to figure out what to do with your body. Like if
Right.
you have all this anxious energy and you're just trying to sit still, like you can spread that energy out like into the world around you. There's also like benefits of talking while walking, right? There's the bilateral movement of that. There's a calming response. There's again moving that anxiety energy through is grounding because your feet are like, continuing to make contact on the ground. There's the higher ability to connect with the therapist and improve the therapeutic rapport because walking with someone helps sync the nervous systems.
Mm.
And we know that therapeutic rapport is one of the main, like how good of a relationship you have with your therapist is one of the main indicators of therapeutic outcomes. And then also like as a therapist who likes to move their body a lot, especially as we're talking about difficult things, like being outdoors just kind of gives us that the ability to just like we're going to like wiggle and we have space. You're not worrying about like hitting the books around you. You just scream over the lake if you want to, and all you're startling is the ducks. There's a lot more options available to people.
That probably explains why when I'm dealing with a difficult client, I like to go I like to walk around while I'm on the phone. I never really understood why, but I guess I kind of do now after hearing that explanation. I guess is it very similar to how with children they would do you would do like play therapy or something where it's almost like instead of just sitting in a on a chair and the only thing you have is your thoughts and you're staring at this other person that's sitting across from you, you're distracting yourself with something else so that you can really allow yourself to be more open. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, but see, it's similar, but it's not even about distracting yourself. It's actually about integrating yourself. So, as you said,
Mhm.
when you're sitting down talking to someone, you're only focused on the thoughts. So, we're really only talking about your frontal lobe of your brain, which is like just one portion of your brain. We're ignoring the rest of the portion of your brain and then like the whole rest of your body, too. Right. So, there's so much information that we're not getting when we just sit and talk and when we're able to include things like movement, play, art, music, all of those things, we are able to actually access other parts of the body. And those other parts are the more emotional parts, right? The thoughts are all quite logic based, but when we're trying to deal with emotional distress in therapy sessions, it's helpful to actually tap into where does emotion live. And we do that by movement and art and music, not really by words.
Well, so we just were talking about movement. So tell us a little bit about let's talk about music and art, those sorts of things. How does that help someone when you're providing services to somebody who's going through some kind of trauma that they're trying to recover from? How do you use music and art to help them?
Mhm. Okay, and so I want to preface this with I am not a licensed music therapist or art therapist, and those are like, both like things to be licensed in, though I do try and read up on my research and use them to influence my talk therapy. But yeah, so music, for example, lights up your whole brain, which is super exciting. As I was just saying, like when we're talking, we're really focused on maybe the frontal lobes and Broca's area, like some specific parts of the brain. But music is going to light up the whole brain, so it's going to make it a bit easier to access some of the emotional spaces, and also vice versa. If someone's very emotionally regulated, or sorry, very emotionally escalated, it can be hard for them to think clearly, right? Essentially, the emotional brain is so strong that the logic brain kind of just like dims down and shuts off and lets the emotion brain takes over. But if you play music, it lights the logic brain back up. So you learn how to make logical decisions even while highly emotional. And if anyone has ever been super angry, you know that sometimes it's very hard to make the decision that you logically want to make when you're experiencing such an overwhelming emotion. Um, it can help with like finding words, both music and art. So using like drawing or engaging with art in any way. My cat is being just like very obnoxious right now. Um, so engaging with music or art in any way allows you to start to access words in a different way, right? It's like a different neural pathway to accessing words. So sometimes when people have experienced really difficult events, they actually just don't have words for it. And that is partly because of how the event gets recorded in memory and how trauma affects how like we record memories. Part of it is about losing access to the part of your brain that allows for speech. Um, but yeah, when we listen to music and when we are actively engaging with art, we're able to use our words better. And then there's, a whole bunch of benefits of like strengthening the frontal lobe. So when we are highly emotional, often, kind of what I was saying, that when the emotion brain turns up, the logic brain turns down. Well, if that happens a lot, then the frontal lobes essentially start to atrophy. They get smaller. So you see people with a lot of trauma, they actually have smaller frontal lobes. Um, and sometimes we just need to beef those up to help people make more logical decisions, improve their executive functioning, decision making, all of those types of things. And, doodling 20 minutes a day can start to improve your frontal lobes. Listening to music can start to, because it's lighting up your whole brain. So it's giving that life, is working out that frontal lobe. So a lot of there, I mean, I can go on and on and on. There's so many different ways to use music and art. Those are like some of my favorite key points.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been documented. I mean, beyond this, I mean, just music in general. There's a reason I also did music growing up, and basically everyone that I was in music with me ended up with, lawyers, doctors, engineers, architects. Like really, it's almost like it somehow enhances everything in your life. And I'm a big proponent. My daughter's about to start middle school, and I was like, "Oh, please do band," and she's doing it. So I'm very excited now. But yeah, I think we've all been there. Like, even if you're like sad, you want to turn on music, and and all of a sudden after listening to some music, feel a little bit better. And I think most people never knew why, and now we have a reason. I certainly never
Mhm,
knew that. The doodling, well, I would never doodle. I can draw a stick figure. That's about it. But doodling and doing art, those are just things that anyone can do, right? Like anyone can do those things. But so moving on to so we talked about movement already and how movement can help. But when we first spoke, you told me that food can be part of therapy. I have
yes.
got to know about this. How is food part of this therapeutic process? And I'm just so fascinated. I'm just going to stop talking and let you just tell us all about this.
Okay, yeah, no, this is it's gonna be another long-winded one for sure. So there's so many ways. So one is like your cues for eating and your cravings. So our bodies tell us exactly what kind of fuel that we need, but a lot of times we don't really listen to that. It's a practice to intuitively eat, and that's the whole thing, like intuitive eating. But being able to listen to your body and figure out what it needs. Um, just fun fact, a lot of us need way more carbs than we actually give ourselves. Um, Especially if you are going through emotional and mental distress, because your brain, I believe, is, you might need to fact check me on this number, but I believe it's 80% fueled by carbs. Your nervous system is mostly fueled by carbs. Um, so if you are overworking your nervous system by being anxious a lot, you actually do need more carbs. And people, again, we intuitively know this. You had a really hard day and you crave pizza or cookies or pasta or some dessert, right? We crave carby foods because that actually is what fuels our bodies. Now, there are many different types of carbs. So, you may need to listen to your body about, do you really need like candy or, maybe like a bean-based dish? You know, all no food is good or bad, listen to your body, do what you gotta do. But I'm not saying like only eat chocolate cake exclusively if you're stressed out. I'm saying that like you know, there are times where we actually do need to fuel our bodies. I see this with working out a lot too. People are like, I need to have all of the protein. But if we don't have enough carbs, our bodies just turn protein into carbs. So you're not even really increasing your protein intake if you don't have a solid carb base. So that's one thing, is listening to your body and not judging the foods that you're eating, but really just trying to build that relationship with your body and giving it what it needs. There are the ways that you prepare food and you actually eat. So, is preparing food a chore for you? I know, like, I've had a lot of struggles personally with like actually cooking, and when I cook with other people, it makes it much more pleasurable. Um, and less anxiety inducing, or being able to like put a show on, or alternatively like be really mindful as you're cooking, having making cooking a fun experience. Is eating a pleasurable experience? Do you only eat while you're on the go? Is there any way that you can kind of slow down what you're eating and actually notice and enjoy the foods that you're eating? And then we can get into the actual like, what are the foods that you're eating, right? There are going to be some foods that have benefits for, anxiety versus depression and mood versus like relaxation, versus stress management, right? I mean, we co-evolved with this planet. So a lot of our needs can be met with things that grow are natural on this planet. And it's just about having some of that information accessible to you, and then also figuring out like what is in like your budget, what's in your time budget, like how much cooking can you do? Like, are you someone who can meal prep? If not, like what if you have to buy things regularly, eat a lot more like foods on the go, like how can you be intentional about the types of foods that you're eating? How's your digestion? Do you know that if you just eat vegetables at the beginning of your meal and then eat the rest of your meal, then that can actually moderate your glucose levels, right? So you don't even need to change anything that you're eating. You just need to eat it maybe in a different order, because chemistry is fascinating. I'm not great at chemistry, but I love it when people figure that out for me and then tell me, and then I can tell y'all, right? Like, how's your digestion? I'm a big fan of talking about poop, right? That gives us a lot of information. Are you pooping regularly? What are the qualities of the poops? What are the poops telling you about how your body is storing things, either like food or emotions? Usually, like if you're constipated, a lot of times people are also emotionally a little constipated, right? So many different ways to interact with food and use it for information and eating for information of how your body is doing, and then starting to create this conversation with your body.
So fascinating. I was just thinking when you said you might be emotionally constipated. What about the opposite problem?
Yeah, people's emotions just flinging out,
Oh my
like no
goodness.
emotional regulation, crying, like anxiety attacks all the
Mm.
time. I haven't seen a particular study on this, but I bet there is a correlation of people who are stressed out and are having chronic diarrhea and the amount of, like, physical anxiety that they are, like, sweating or panic attacks or any of that, I'm sure there's a correlation there.
Oh my. Well, when we started talking, I didn't know that we were gonna start talking about poop, but it makes total sense. It makes complete sense that every little thing that happens in your body is related to something else that's going on. Uh, I always think it's like stress in general. I mean, we're talking about trauma here, but anything that's stress related does so many things to your body. I know, like I'll get a headache or like a one of my like eyelids will flutter. Like there's all kinds of weird things that happen, and it's all related. So I guess that kind of brings us full circle. We kind of talked about each of these little pieces, but you use all of them holistically to help somebody, and not just, you don't just do traditional talk therapy. You sort of try to integrate everything. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Uh,
which I think is a little, which is fairly unique. I've done talk therapy since I was probably in law school for more than 20 years, and I've never had any therapist uh, suggest anything other than the talk, like the sitting on the couch and the talking, and it's probably why I felt it's had limited utility over the years because it sounds like what you're trying to tell us is that's just one piece of it. And to really fully help somebody, you should take a more holistic approach. So why don't you take us through, someone comes into you with a trauma, and let's say it's divorce since this podcast is about divorce, but it could be any trauma, and you start figuring out which of these things would be important to help them. How do you go about doing that? Like, what's the sort of investigation that you go through to figure out which of these little things that we've been talking about is really going to help that person with the trauma that they presented to you?
yeah, yeah. So, in the intake session, I actually try not to talk about the trauma itself, much at all, because that can just be really overwhelming for a lot of people. Instead, I like to focus on how their daily life is being impacted. So what is their, like, eating and appetite like? What is their sleep like? I ask a lot of questions about their sleep. Are they having any regular, physical health symptoms like migraines, excessive sweating, trouble regulating their temperature, shaking in their limbs, right? I got a whole list of of questions that I ask about their physical health. Um, to just try and start to see, like, what is the nervous system doing, right? And where are you finding impairment in your day-to-day living, and what is the most impactful out of that impairment, right? So someone may not be sleeping as well as they would like to be, but they have the flexibility to nap during the day. So that's not going to be as impactful for them versus someone who doesn't have the ability to nap during the day. We do really need to increase the quality of nighttime sleep. Or if someone is, gone all day, right? Like their ability to eat and meal plan and, figure out what foods even to go are going to be accessible to them and beneficial to their mental health. Or like after a very stressful event, a lot of times people don't want to eat solid foods. They straight up lose their appetite. So how can we focus on getting you the nutrition that you need, maybe in more liquid and vitamin forms, and then the rest of it is just like calories to keep your body functioning, right? I like to separate out like the nutrition from the calories part. And then, what's already happening in your life? Are you someone who already regularly moves your body or enjoys moving your body? Are you someone who already engages in music and art? Do you have friends that engage with music and art? Are you interested in creating a hobby? Like, or is there a hobby that you used to have that you've been wanting to get back into? Right? What are the most natural ways to start to include these things into your life? If you like music, right, I want to find out how often we can use music in your day, right? If that means dancing to one song in your office in between work meetings to get out the stress, or singing aloud, right? Like there's benefits to actually humming and singing while you are driving or while you are cooking, or while you're showering, or like doing mindfulness with music. It's like that deep listening and like just really exploring new music. So it's really finding that the easiest entry point and then what is going to take the least amount of time,
Mhm.
right? I try not to, especially when we're first getting started, recommend things that are going to take more than 5 minutes. Ideally, the things that I'm suggesting take 1 to 3 minutes because we are in late stage capitalism. No one has time to set aside an hour, 2 hour of a whole like wellness, like healing routine. And um, also, that's going to have limited benefits. If we can do like 2 minutes here, 1 minute there, 30 seconds there, 5 minutes there throughout the day, that actually is going to encourage ongoing relaxation for your nervous system. Instead of letting it build all the way up and then having this hour to release and then letting it build all the way up again, you can prevent your nervous system from building all of that stress in the first place, right? Because you have all of these tiny interventions, and those are often much easier to maintain. So really about I look at like what's going to be the easiest way for people to access this in their life, what's going to be fun. I do think that healing can be fun. I do think that like healing doesn't always need to look like healing. Sometimes healing is going to the club and throwing ass, right? Because trauma lives in the hips. So move those hips around. Um, so whatever feels fun to you, whatever you're most likely to do is going to be the most effective path forward towards healing.
And you were a personal trainer, so is this we talked about movement, but is this where you integrate some of that into the therapeutic services? Or like how do you combine, because I could see how just getting someone more physically fit, more we've already talked about how the food part of this comes in, but obviously the becoming more physically fit and healthy is probably part of it too. Do you combine that? Do you help some people with talk therapy, and then on Monday and then on Tuesday you're doing personal training with them? Do you ever like combine those two things?
I do, yeah. With, only a handful of my clients, that, with complex trauma over long periods of time, there's a high correlation with, physical health issues. And it can make, going to the gym feel really inaccessible and group fitness classes really inaccessible. So, I kind of specialize in trauma-informed fitness and functional movement versus like necessarily just weight loss. But really like meeting your like functional movement goals and your mental health goals. Um, but like in a therapeutic session, if someone is not interested in more of like the let's go to the gym and work out, there are a lot of different principles. Like I try to get people to live in their body a bit more, and that means, like, moving their body. So, a lot of times I, like, happy dance if they did something super well, and then they're just, like, looking at me like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Are you really just gonna have me over here wiggling all by myself?" And then they'll just, like, join in very reluctantly, but, uh, they start to get used to moving their bodies and, like, engaging with their bodies when they're having emotions, positive or negative emotions. It can be like, "Wow, that sounds really stressful, and I can see you tensing up. So let's do some neck circles to just kind of loosen up or some shoulder rolls." It can be like I work with a lot of neurodivergent clients as well, and they're like, I'm having a lot of trouble focusing. Okay, well, balance poses, static holds, those can really help boost your focus for a short amount of time afterwards. So we're gonna get up and we're gonna do like a tree pose. Maybe we're gonna do like a little bit of movement, so it's easier to then come to the stillness of a tree pose. If a balance pose is ever too easy for you, close your eyes. It's going to be much harder. And that's also developing proprioception, which is impaired for people who have experienced trauma, right? So when you've had experienced trauma, like you're actually more clumsy. So if you can improve your ability to sense where you are in the world, that's what proprioception is, then, and that's what balance will rely on. Um, then we're also meeting trauma goals. So it is about taking a lot of this information that I have about the body and how it works and what is helpful, and then finding ways I can do that again in 30 seconds within a therapy session to help meet the goals of whatever we're talking about.
So fascinating. I, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are men, and men in general, as you're aware, are resistant to therapy to begin with. It's very difficult to get men to just go to therapy, and once they do, they realize the benefits of it. I'm using therapy very broadly in this context. Getting help. Let's make it more broad. Getting help with what they're going through,
Yeah,
because first of all, they have to be, they have to be open to the idea that they need help to begin with, and a lot of men have trouble with that, and it extends to everything. I mean, a lot of men don't even want their kids to go to therapy for very similar reasons, because they see it as you're going because there's something wrong with you, as opposed to just allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to let someone else help you through something. So whenever you're talking uh, to the male population to get them sort of into this holistic approach, have you been met with any resistance? And if so, how do you overcome that?
for sure. I definitely have. Well, one question I ask frequently is like, why are you paying me? Um, like there's definitely some willingness to change if you are making a financial and time commitment in late stage capitalism, right? There's something there. So asking them that on a regular basis makes them remember why they're there. Um, I think I've had two clients in my whole career be like, "You're right. I don't actually want to be here," and then stop coming after I've asked that question. And it's fine. That's where they are in their healing journey. Um, so reminding them why they are there. But I think the other part is, when we talk about holistic healing, everything affects one another. So okay, you don't want to open up and you don't want to talk about like a super hard thing and be incredibly vulnerable right now. That's fine. We don't have to do that. That's actually probably wise. Maybe you don't have the capacity to dive into that and it would be more dysregulating for you if you did. Like that could actually be a helpful instinct. Doesn't mean there's nothing we can do, right? And again, I like to focus on how is it impacting your day to day, right? So it's a problem solving of the sleeping, the eating, the having hobbies, the building friends, building relationships and having a solid support system. What are some of those other things that maybe seem a bit more like coaching, um, and can seem a little bit more solution focused? Let's just focus on those at first. We can build trust with one another, and if you can heal those areas of your life, you're still healing whatever trauma you're experiencing. If you heal any part of your body or any part of your existence, like daily existence, you're healing all of you because we're one integrative being. So if all you want to be able to do is consistently, you know, go to the gym or consistently hang out with a friend, or consistently do your dishes, right? We can focus on that, and that is going to have broader impacts. And once you've already done some of this healing in like other ways and we've built trust together, then I find I don't need to, beg anyone to open up. They're ready to. And when they're ready to, they will. And I'm going to be there for them when they are.
I just love all the different ways that you can help somebody get to the goal. The goal is to, I guess, rebound, if that's a good word, rebound from this trauma. Um, I just think it's so fascinating because most people, out in the world, when you say therapy, we all have that one image in our head. You sitting on a couch and someone with a pad sitting in front of you taking notes. That's what almost everyone's like image is of therapy, thanks to, of course, movies and TV shows.
Mhm.
And I just love hearing how there's really a lot of different ways to help somebody. And I love how you're tapping into all of these and you're figuring out what's good for that particular person, what's really going to help them specifically, because your goal is to help them. And your tool chat test, your tool chest is much bigger than a lot of other therapists that I've spoken to over the years. I'm kind of wondering, and this is a question a lot of people have, um, how do you know that you need or that you would really benefit from therapy? And I know that the easy answer, of course, is almost everyone would benefit from therapy for various parts of our lives. But we're specifically talking about trauma here. So when you've been through something traumatic, how do you know that really you need to go to therapy? And I guess even more specifically, I mean, we're talking about the kind of therapy you do. How do you know where to go? Like who to reach out to? Just give us some insight because this is the number one question I get all the time. People are like, "Well," I'm like, "Well, you need to go get help," and they're like, "Well, where should I go?" And my view is it's so dependent on you and what your specific needs are. So I'd just like to hear a little bit about what you think about that.
Yeah. Um, I would say, what is your goal? Like, what if you woke up tomorrow and you're living your perfect life, what would that look like? Now, what are the barriers to getting there, right? Is it that you don't believe that it's true, that it's possible? Is it that, it's a financial barrier? Is it that it's too scary, right? Is it that you would be setting yourself up for really big disappointment? Like, what is actually the barrier? And what would you need to remove that barrier? Do you need a therapist? Do you need someone who can uh like set aside space for you to like process things out loud? Would a journal help with that instead? Would friends help with that instead? I actually think that most healing happens in community. My big thing is for people to not need to see me, right? How can you have such a supportive community structure that you get most of your needs met through your community, whatever that looks like for you? I'm just one person, right? I ideally, in my opinion, am not the main source of support. If I need to be for right now, that's okay, right? But my goal is for you to get other supports. So if you already have other supports, how can you tap into them? And are those supports the ones that you need to reach your goals? And if not, how can you build those other supports? And if you need assistance with that, then maybe consider getting a therapist that can help you build out your supports. Or if it's something that's like really specialized, right? Like there's no one in my life who understands like this particular trauma symptom, or maybe it's something like OCD, or maybe it's something you feel really, really ashamed about, like urges that you're having, right? And you're just like, I wouldn't trust this with anyone who's not legally obliged to not tell it to someone else, right? Like, okay, then a therapist is the appropriate support. But really thinking truly, truly being intentional about your goals and like what supports you need to remove the barriers to your goals.
Do
And then
you
how do you find a therapist? That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. A lot of therapists on Instagram now, with like there's laws being passed for therapists to be able to practice out of state. Um, and like if you're licensed in one state, you're licensed in 30 states. So be on the lookout for more of those happening. But do interviews for your therapist, right? Like a lot of them will do like free consultations. What are you looking for in a therapist? What have you had in a therapist before that you don't want? What have you maybe heard from me that you're like, oh, maybe I would want that? Um, and how can you can ask for those things very specifically and just keep waiting until you find the right one for you.
so are you able to help anyone outside of Washington where you live?
Yeah, I'm actually also licensed in New Jersey.
Mm,
Um, yeah.
there you go.
So if yeah, any New Jersey listeners, I'm actually currently accepting clients, which is rare for me. And then I also recently started a Patreon. You can join for as little as $5 a month, and anyone in the world can join that. And that you said my tool chest is higher than a lot
Yeah.
of other therapists, and that's kind of the intention is to disperse this knowledge. So there is going to be stuff of just like, okay, here's the like therapy basics, here's like coping skills library, but then here's how do you use movement and art and BDSM and all these different things to help healing. And I also talk a lot about how this relates to systemic oppression and like the overlays of trauma and oppression, because I know a lot of people come to me for my identities um, that I hold a lot of marginalized identities, and so talking a little bit about the intersections there. So if that feels like more of a self-paced vibe is what you're looking for, I also have that Patreon.
Awesome. Well, if anyone would like to reach you and learn a little bit more about your services, how would they do that?
Yeah, I am on all platforms. TISE Consulting and Therapy. It's TISE. And so on Instagram and TikTok, at TISE Consulting and Therapy. My Patreon is, patreon.com/ TISE Consulting and Therapy. My website, TISEconsultingtherapy.com, and also Consulting and Therapy at Gmail if you just want to directly email me. But yeah, I'm all over the place. But it's the same name. So look me up on Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, LinkedIn, uh, or my website.
All right, and we'll have all of those links in the show notes below, so don't feel like you have to try to write everything down as as you were hearing it. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to thank your cat for making an impromptu appearance as well. Those of you that are listening did not see, but all of you watching definitely got the co-star. Got to see the co-star on the screen a little bit. But thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a joy.